Last video cut off when I was in a stream of consciousness talking about the band King Crimson, a seminal progressive rock band, kind of the birth of progressive rock, that type thing. And I don't remember exactly what I said about this album, but I understand why it's not as popular as the first one. I understand why it's not as popular as the first two. I understand why it's not as popular as the first three. I understand why maybe Larkstones and Aspic or Red are more popular. I understand all that. But this is probably my favorite one. The third album is held up by the Lizard Suit, the whole second side that's just a long song. The second one, The Wake of Poseidon, has the Devil's Triangle on it, which I think does hold up as well as the rest of the album. And the first album, it has those bookends of, and I showed this yesterday, but 21st Century Schizoid Man in the title track, and the three folk songs in the middle are just stupendous. This is more folky. I understand that it's a little more, the songs don't build up or go as many places, and a lot of times I like a good build up. And you know, the first song has a bass line, doom doom, doom, that goes on for like 5 minutes, feels like forever. I understand all that, but this is probably my favorite one. It's a very popular band that had many inceptions, that went and kept going and is still around today. Their live stuff is the best. Anything that you can find by them live is better than anything they did in the studio. They did a live in Chicago a couple of years ago. They did the Lizard Suit, which I never hear them do the Lizard Suit live, all the way through. It's incredible. That album is just absolutely incredible. And the percussion players they have now, the players that they have now, for some reason just do it for me. Is there better progressive rock bands than King Crimson? In my opinion, yes. No pun intended, the band Yes is probably a little better. Genesis is definitely a lot better. Van de Graaff Generator is a lot better. But I understand King Crimson's place in history, and you know, they're good. They're always worth talking about. They're incredible. I don't want to bash on them or anything like that. Here's something, the water damage of the front of it. It's a Ray Barretto. This has some salsa on it. It's mostly what's called charanga, kind of just up and down salsa. It's not as good as some of the other stuff. I've had this for like 20 years. It's good Ray Barretto. What's the name of it? Carnival. It's good Ray Barretto, not great Ray Barretto. The stuff that was great was the stuff that was done in the late 60s and early 70s. This is 80s. Not bad. Maybe it's not 80s. Let me take a look at it. I'm kind of curious. It's actually 1975. It's not on the Salsa record label, so it was something that he did to maybe gain more commercial appeal. I hate to say that. He's not a commercial artist, but he's an interesting cat. He would always call himself a jazz artist and then turn around and play salsa music. I think he pissed a lot of people off. Conga player joined the army, came out, or piano player joined the army, came out, learned the conga. He worked with Adalberto Santiago, which is just an incredible singer. He worked with some other incredible singers. He worked with all the great jazz salsa musicians. You know, I've had conversations with some of the musicians he's played with. Sounds like the cat knocked something over. Meditation, this is on Laser Light. I'm always glad to find these because they just sound good when you want to listen to meditation music. Don't hate me for it. I do really like this stuff. It's kind of in the realm of, can't think of his name, a person that, I wish I could think of his name, Japanese artist. It's kind of in that realm. Blood Sugar Sex Magic. Had this album a few times. Had it when it came out. It's Red Hot Chili Peppers. You know, I don't really want to talk about Red Hot Chili Peppers. I think they're a little overrated. Their songs are really catchy. You hear them all the time. You know, I can hear songs in my head by them. Another Coldplay, Parachute, I think is the name of this one. No, A Rush of Blood to the Head. I don't know what Coldplay sounds like. I pick up their albums for 10 cents and I'm like, I'm going to listen to this because they're popular. I want to know what they are, and then I never listen to them. Just for whatever reason, I'm not turned on by them. I couldn't tell you why. All That Remains. This is a good band that's kind of in the metal realm. They're not thrash. I don't know exactly how to categorize them. They're good. I've heard a couple of their albums. Can't say a lot about them, but they're good. Modern Jazz Quartet. I've talked about them before. They did a lot of stuff for Prestige, record label that I really like. Of course, this is on Atlantic. John Lewis, Milt Jackson, vibraphone player. They're a really vibraphone heavy band, no horns. Piercy Heath and Connie Kay on drums. Their best album is the soundtrack, and I can't think of the name of it. I can hear the songs in my head. It's a really laid back album. This one it's good. It's not great. Some of their stuff's better than others. They had a lot of different, they played for a while, been on a lot of different record labels. You can find their records really cheap. They're around all over the place. Just a huge fan of John Lewis, the piano player, a huge fan of Milt Jackson, the vibraphone player, and a huge fan of Connie Kay, the drummer. And yeah, I don't want to, the bass player is great too, but those three, I recognize those three. I recognize their music. I recognize their place in jazz history. Leonard Skinner Collectibles, Disc 2. Yeah, I get it. They're probably racist. They fly that Confederate flag. Yeah, that's a bunch of bull crap that sucks. They have 2 good songs on this album. Of course, the cover of it got damaged, and this is Disc 2. I think T for Texas is on here. Sorry, love that song. And there's one other live song that they do on here that I can't think of off the top of my head. T for Texas is a great live song. Sorry I like that, but I do like it. Opera Sauvage by Vangelis. Got all this stuff on record. I let my kid listen to it at night some. The Vangelis, the Greek god of electronic music, synthesizer music. He's most known probably for the soundtrack to Blade Runner, which is an incredible soundtrack. When you listen to that music, you are taken to that time and place within that movie. They're not, shoot, I love Vangelis. I wish there is a picture of him there. He's a big, big man. And maybe Chariots of Fire. Dun, 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 dun. Think about that being on a piano. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. You would know that song if you heard it. He's good. I love Vangelis. Tribe Called Quest. This is an anthology series, their best of. I love Tribe Called Quest because they sound great and their music is not full of lyrics about banging women. And I don't care about any of the gangster stuff. None of that bothers me. When they talk about what they want to do to women and having sex with all these women and beating up all these women, that really bothers me. You can talk about the devil stuff kind of bothers me. The misogyny, the sexism always bothers me in hip-hop music. Gangster stuff, when they talk about gang banging and all that, none of that bothers me. I think that does have a place in music, a place in pop culture, because people do live like that, and we shouldn't forget that. Tribe Called Quest is great. They have great beats, great samples, and they're not full of all that. They can prove that you can do this music without being sexist. And they prove that you can do it without talking about gangbanging and all that, because they don't really talk about that. Tribe Called Quest is great. I talked about this the other day. I think I called it Pink Houses. American Fool. I always end up just playing the first 2 songs on here. Hurt So Good and Jack and Diane. I played this for my foster kids. When I had my foster kids, they loved it. The drummer on here is on a movie that I've talked about on Netflix called Hired Guns. The drummer that does the Jack and Diane, dun 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 dun. He does the drum solo part on there, and he's like, okay, you want me to play a drum solo? And he talks about walking up to the drum set and what's going through his mind when all that is going on. John Cougar Mellencamp was going to kick him out of the band, and he turned around and he said, I am your drummer. You are going to put me in your band. I'm going to sleep on your floor. I'm your drummer. I'm going to do everything you can. And the way he said it, John Cougar Mellencamp couldn't say no. And then it turns out that he has that iconic drum solo on that song, Jack and Diane. And, I can't remember his name. It's a really good movie. Got to watch it. It should still be on Netflix. All right, here we go. 3 more. And the one I'm going to pick up first is Genesis, Abacab. This album brings me back to a time and a place. Some of these songs, like Abacab, No Reply at All, and that's probably about it. Or radio hits. I love this sound of this. It takes me back to that time and place, back to the early 80s, early 80s when I was young. I was born in 1980. This album is really, really good. Not their best. I have to say it's incredible. Abacab is just an incredible song. No Reply at All. Me and Sarah Jane, Keep It Dark. Dodo Lurker is one of my favorite Genesis songs because it's just so progressive and it just does what I feel like a progressive / poppy type song should do. I love Genesis, love them to death, love this album. Duke is probably my favorite, but this is better than the two that came after that, the self-titled one and the Invisible Touch, and then We Can't Dance. It's better than all those, but it's not as good as some of the earlier ones when Phil Collins took over. It's definitely not as good as the Peter Gabriel stuff, but that song Dodo Lurker is a top 10 Genesis song for me. It has a little solo in the middle of it. Dun 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 dun. I mean, it's amazing that you can have progressive rock and then play something so simplistic in the middle of it, of a progressive song, and have that part of that song have so much meaning to you. Real quick, can't read this. Don't know. It's a bunch of Christian music, it looks like, and it says No Lies. It's got stuff like DC Talk on it. Not a real big fan. And then Bob Marley and the Wailers. I've talked about them before. 2-disc set. Love Bob Marley.